Good morning. Good morning. Today is Friday, November 8th. Good day, good afternoon, good evening. Today I want to establish, yeah, today I want to establish my principle to combat this idea that I've seen floating around over the years. I've seen it on YouTube. I've seen it in different sanghas around the country on the West Coast. Um, I see it mostly with white Buddhists, white American Buddhists, but the idea is, or maybe it's a desire, it's an idea or a desire that people want Buddhism to be apolitical, or they think that Buddhism is not political or that it should not be political. And for my part, I just want to combat that as much as I can here with this video. And I'm not an expert, okay? So let's get that right on the table. I'm not an expert. I don't professionally study. I don't have any accolades, no big endorsements. I am just a dude in a Detroit Tigers hat. My name is Seer121. If you know me, it's Casimir. Okay. But the idea that I see brought up constantly in the same clothes, pretty much the same garments, is that Buddhism needs to be spiritual and it shouldn't be political, or that there's this attempt to like whitewash or like PG, make Buddhism be like this PG PC thing where it's like acceptable for whatever, safe and it's nice and safe for I don't know where like people want like this innocent, they want this innocence in Buddhism, or they want Buddhism to be this like pure, untouched, unscathed by the worldly whatever affairs. And I'm here to say that's just not reality. That's not how history has unfolded. That's actually, uh, and then also attempting to either weaponize Buddhism for one side or the other in the states here for either Democrat or Republican causes, I think is also, that's a big misstep. And I think it's disingenuous, okay, and it's fake. It's not real to try to use Buddhism. I've seen it used a couple ways. Like I've seen a couple different YouTube channels here try to lean Buddhism to one side of the aisle, and I've seen Buddhism try to be leaned on the other side of the aisle to like be used as a tool for whatever Republican causes or Democratic causes, and that's not reality either. So my perspective is, this is my perspective on Buddhism, is that Buddhism, it's not apolitical, okay, and it's also not Republican or Democrat. If anything, from my perspective, Buddhism is completely anti-establishment. So just I'm putting that out there and give it some air to breathe. That Buddhism is anti-establishment, and I'll even step one foot further, saying any attempts to make Buddhism other than anti-establishment is a huge misstep, and it's a misconception, and it's not Buddhism at all. It's in fact something else. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on history, but I know a little bit about Asian history and the continent of Asia. Okay, we're gonna talk about Vietnam, and we're gonna talk about Thich Quang Duc. Thich Quang Duc was the monk in Vietnam who you see photographed. You've seen the photograph. I'm going to try to put the photograph on the cover of this video. But he is the monk who died by self-immolation, and he was protesting a tyrannical state of the Vietnamese government at the time, where it was the population, the people of Vietnam at the time were 90% Buddhists, but the governing body that were governing those people was led by a Roman Catholic cabinet, okay? and not only just a Roman Catholic, but a staunchly fierce, authoritative Roman Catholic, where at one point the the leader of that government had banned flags. They banned the display or use or anything to do with flags. They wouldn't allow it. Okay? So on the day of Thich Quang Duc's self-immolation, okay, there was many Buddhists in the city center waving Buddhist flags in protest of the policy set forth by the government of Vietnam that flags were banned. Why? Because as I've read it and as I understand it, the leader of the government, who's a Roman Catholic, whatever, some weeks before this protest, was waving flags in support of his brother, who was the archbishop. They were waving Roman Catholic flags to celebrate the archbishop, whatever he was doing some weeks earlier. So then flags are banned, but okay, only some flags, right? So have you heard this story before? Does this sound familiar? The government banned flags except for the flags that they were waving. Okay, fast forward to the day of the self-immolation, of Thich Quang Duc's self-immolation. That had culminated in basically the Vietnamese state military firing live ammunition rounds into crowds to try to quell or stop them from doing what crowds do when crowds are protesting, being free to express themselves. Okay, so to basically put an end to this horror of armies being turned onto the people, this monk, Thich Quang Duc, had himself poured gasoline on himself. Other monks poured gasoline on him. And he sat in the lotus position and lit a match to protest the horrors that were happening that day, and also to protest all the leading horrors that led up to that moment. Okay? In conjunction with Thich Quang Duc's self-immolation, the Buddhists of Vietnam had listed 5 demands that called for religious equality within Vietnam and justice for the dead. Is any of this sounding familiar? Okay, so what we have in Vietnam at this time is a religious organization, an organizing of religious ideas that can be utilized as a vehicle to facilitate social change. Now, why is this history, why is these facts not talked about when we talk about Buddhism? I've been studying Buddhism since 2000, 2001, and I've seen this photograph of the burning monk, as he's called, air quotes, burning monk. I've seen photographs. If you listen to Rage Against the Machine, you know that photograph is on their album. You've seen this photograph circulated in many, many places. There's been art exhibits about this. But specifically in Buddhist circles, my question is, why is this not common knowledge? And then also, why in American Buddhist circles, why is this man, Thich Quang Duc, why is he not celebrated? Why is he not revered? Why doesn't every Buddhist person in America know this man's name? And why isn't there more cause for celebration around this man and his courageous act of self-immolation, his courageous act of protest? Because what seems to have happened is this man, he gets put on his photograph gets put on a Rage Against the Machine album cover, which is Rage Against the Machine's self-titled debut album, amazing album. But then, as time goes on from the original date, it's like this man becomes more of a symbol than actually a story of a man who lived and died and breathed and a monk who was actually practicing Buddhist. And the fact that he used Buddhism and his spiritual practice as a vehicle to, one, interact with a government that was oppressive and murderous. He found this Buddhism a proper vehicle to state a claim, to make a statement of what was happening at the time and where he was, and then also where his Buddhist counterparts, his Buddhist compatriots, his fellow monks, where the Buddhist community was spiritually. They made a statement against an oppressive force, against an oppressive government. Now, it seems clear, actually, why that story would want to be symbolized into just a picture or a piece of painting, and why the full story is not ever discussed. And even right now, I feel ill-equipped to even be bringing up Brother Thich Quang Duc's name, because I'm just reading a couple articles earlier this morning and relaying what I read in those articles. But I feel like even this little bit of information that I'm bringing to the table is important, because as I'm discovering things, I want to share this with my audience, whoever's watching this. And that way we can kind of learn together. So that's the intro. Brother Thich Quang Duc, may he know peace, may Allah be pleased with him. Okay? Now what I'm saying is, why have we allowed Buddhism to be whitewashed and be smoothed out its edges? And why is this story not talked about more? I mean, I consider myself a journalist, so I'm learning how to tell stories that need to be told in writing or in video format here. But I want to ask this question about, why have we, Buddhists in America, why have we allowed this story to just fall by the wayside? And is there something connected to this story falling by the wayside and the political implications of the current state that this country is in presently? I don't know. Okay? But one thing I am going to do is, the content that I'm consuming, whether video or book format, I'm going to definitely make sure to keep Brother Thich Quang Duc's spirit close to mine. And also, all of these lessons, all of these Dharma talks, I feel like are pointless if we don't remember Brother Thich Quang Duc and the spirit of his sacrifice and the spirit of his vision and the spirit of the community around him who held him up and who supported his bold statement of ultimate consequence. And I've read it, seen it said that without Brother Thich Quang Duc's ultimate sacrifice, the United States of America might not have even gotten into Vietnam. So, yeah, man, that's what it is. This is, I think this is a time where nothing can be apolitical. I mean, we've been past that time, but I just want to put my kind of stakes in the ground. Where my tent will be is that go back to any of my videos, and maybe this is a challenge for myself as well. Any of my videos, and I hope none of that stuff can be depoliticized. And if somebody's going to use my teachings, my lessons, my perspective on the Dharma for a political reason. I hope and pray that the political meaning behind my lessons, behind my work, is one of destabilizing empire and is one of anti-authoritarianism and ultimately of liberation. That's what's on my mind. You see my eyes a little tired today. It's been a long week, man. It's Friday though. If you made it, salutations. If you made it this far, you gotta just salute yourself, give yourself a pat on the back. And yeah, I'm gonna read now from The First and Last Freedom by Krishnamurti on nationalism. Question: what is it that comes when nationalism goes? Krishnamurti: obviously intelligence. But I am afraid that it is not the implication in this question. The implication is, what can be substituted for nationalism? Any substitution is an act which does not bring intelligence. If I leave one religion and join another, or leave one political party later, join on something else, this constant substitution indicates a state in which there is no intelligence. How does nationalism go? Only by our understanding its full implications, by examining it, by being aware of its significance in outward and inward action. Outwardly, it brings about divisions between people, classifications, wars, and destruction, which is obvious to anyone who is observant. Inwardly, psychologically, this identification with the greater, with the country, with an idea, is obviously a form of self-expansion. Living in a little village or a big town or whatever it may be, I am nobody. But if I identify myself with the larger, with the country, if I call myself a Hindu, it flatters my vanity. It gives me gratification, prestige, a sense of well-being. And that identification with the larger, which is a psychological necessity for those who feel that self-expansion is essential, also creates conflict, strife between people. Thus, nationalism not only creates outward conflict, but inward frustrations. When one understands nationalism, the whole process of nationalism, it falls away. The understanding of nationalism comes through intelligence, by carefully observing, by probing into the whole process of nationalism, patriotism. Out of that examination comes intelligence, and then there is no substitution of something else for nationalism. The moment you substitute religion for nationalism, religion becomes another means of self-expansion, another source of psychological anxiety, a means of feeding oneself through a belief. Therefore, any form of substitution, however noble, is a form of ignorance. It is like a man substituting chewing gum or betel nut for, or whatever it is, for smoking. Whereas if one really understands the whole problem of smoking, of habits, sensations, psychological demands, and all the rest of it, then smoking drops away. You can understand only when there is a development of intelligence, when intelligence is functioning, and intelligence is not functioning when there is substitution. Substitution is merely a form of self-bribery, to tempt you not to do this but to do that. Nationalism, with its poison, with its misery and world strife, can disappear only when there is intelligence, and intelligence does not come merely by passing examinations and studying books. Intelligence comes into being when we understand problems as they arise, when there is understanding of the problem at its different levels, not only of the outward part but of its inward psychological implications. Then, in that process, intelligence comes into being. So, when there is intelligence, there is no substitution. And when there is intelligence, then nationalism, patriotism, which is a form of stupidity, disappears. Once again, that is The First and Last Freedom by Krishnamurti. And I will end on a poem here from Resuscitations, my debut collection of poetry, entitled 473. The skinny of the situation is, you see, the truth of these deserts in a transplanted palm in a 1 ton heading south on the mental plane. A runaway train can be a cotton ball, a glimpse, autobiography. Green on one side, secret histories of wire cutters unwritten on the other. A different world on the next page. Let it rain licorice and money spinning through space and time forever and ever, amen. Nobody in their cranium can trust the banks or bankers. Thank the sun for blueberries and warm breasts, a species at times propelled by instinct alone, that the heart and the throat, planets revolve, ushers of the unspoken sanctuary we are for sanctuary. Lost languages and the eye of the bull, refusing compliance with the 21st century empire's corpse, crosswalking with diplomats, jaywalking with the clergy, until finally the matador staggers down a dark alley completely, falls to his knees, weeps at the death all around him, and end scene. Every gun on this side of the Mississippi taken off safety when the next contestant wins the sweepstakes and the solutions are far too obvious for speech. Leaders and followers walking around with nothing but industrial fallout in their mouths. What comes next? Walking around with nothing but time on the hands. There hasn't been anything good on TV since at least 1992. How much of watching is seen? Today, the day I make weapons out of remembering. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.